So today I will be reflecting on Vygotsky's piece on children and the imagination. So Vygotsky first starts off with highlighting the unique fact that the brain not only can work on recognizing old experiences and building those tracks and synapses that connect new experiences with old ones, and over time, those new experiences become tracks as they are used more and more. But not only can it do this retaining of information and reproducing, it can also provide creative activity. He calls it the combinatorial or creative activity. So basically his point is that all human activity is this type, because if not, we would just be doing the same things over and over, in a mundane sort of way. Okay, and what's also interesting is that its actual terminology in psychology is fantasy or imagination, which the term for creative activity, I should say, is called fantasy or imagination, which is really interesting because the world takes fantasy and imagination and interprets it as things that only happen within our minds and that aren't really reproduced in a sort of way. And then we go on. Again, it's really important to realize that what he's saying is that humans are not just reproducing experiences over and over and again, but are actually drawing from these experiences and making new ones, which is creative activity. It doesn't have to be something that's just in your mind, that's completely new and realistic, and which we'll get to later, because it's not always new and realistic, it's usually grounded in reality. Okay, so we first look at the association with imagination and reality through the fact, like I said, that everything in a person's imagination is based on things taken from reality, from previous experiences, like that unique part in our brain. Even if it's like Game of Thrones, you still have kings and queens, which we see in reality and history, but they're just, there's certain elements to it that make it fiction or fantasy, and make it creative reality. It's really taking previous experiences and putting a new creative twist on them to create, again, new experiences. And then he kind of draws on the importance of imagination and creation in childhood, and how it is so important that in order to expand a child's creativity, we have to give them these experiences for them to build their creativity on. For example, you look at a child playing with a doll, and she had seen a mother somewhere playing with her baby, and so that's where she draws that experience from, but it is still unique creative activity. Okay, and then we look at the second association. It's not between the elements of imaginary structure and reality, but between the final result of imagination and some real phenomenon. And then he draws on, it doesn't have to be your experience personally, it can also be a social experience or a history, as I said. So this really just makes the important point that creativity doesn't have to be something that you've experienced in life, but also something that you've heard about or seen, paintings or images of, and that you can relate to. And then he also says that this is also can broaden someone's creativity by these experiences that aren't necessarily lived by that person. So here's a quote that really hones in on this. It says, if in the first case imagination is based on experience, in the second case experience itself is based on imagination. And the third association really draws on the linkage between imagination and emotion, and how any kind of emotion is going to invoke an imaginary response. When we picture happiness, we aren't picturing the word happiness, but rather how it makes us feel and what we do when we're happy. This was just really interesting. Psychology has termed the fact that every feeling has not only a physical expression but an internal representation of that emotion, and it's called the dual expression of feeling, which I found really interesting. That it's actually been studied. I mean, of course it has been, but to me it never occurred that like this is a real thing that is studied. And then we get to this section that talks about we're still relating emotion and imagination. And this quote, I really thought it kind of demonstrated the point. However, the inverse relationship between emotion and imagination holds. While in the example, emotion influences imagination, in other cases, imagination influences emotion. So this basically draws on the fact that, just imagining things can impact, your emotions and can influence them and make you think about things differently and feel these emotions. So the last association he talks about is, again, between imagination and reality. This basically just says that association is a construct of fantasy and may present something new, never occurring in inherent human experience before. But once it has been externally made or demonstrated, it becomes a product of reality. So, even in fiction and all these kinds of things, it's almost like once enough people read them, it's become reality in a way. It's not necessarily saying that these things have actually happened, but rather that this idea and this kind of theme is now reality. This is really evident in any kind of fiction that draws an emotional response, and again, all these associations are kind of like mixed together, and all of these things. But in fiction, if something draws an emotional response, it immediately becomes real. And that's why we see art, any kind of art, whether it be a painting or a book, and we feel these intense emotions. But yeah, that's basically what he said. So thank you.